For two teams looking to make a statement in week one, the biggest questions are in the trenches and the backfield, not under center. That's something we couldn't say just a few years ago. That and more coming up right now on Locked On Commanders and Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This is Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network, our first Crossover Thursday of the 2025 NFL season. That means it is finally upon us. I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, CBS affiliate in the DMV. Joining me is the host of Locked On Giants, Patricia Traina, who also serves as a managing editor and a beat reporter, of course, covering the New York Giants for Sports Illustrated. We want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders and Locked On Giants your first listen or view today and every single day. And a special thank you goes out to all of the everydayers for both shows who come through for every single episode of our respective shows. If it's your first time here for either show, thank you. Welcome. Hopefully you like what you hear and you come back for more. Coming up on today's episode, our keys to victory for each team in this big NFC East divisional matchup to start the season. We're also going to dive into elite trench matchups that are going to help decide the game. But first, the Washington backfield is crowded, and one key offensive lineman in New York is the biggest story surrounding each of these teams. All that coming up on this Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Giants, both parts of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing it thanks to Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Patricia, we have been waiting for this moment all off season, at least since the schedule came out, right? Always love doing these Crossover Thursdays. Always love getting to talk to people who are on ground. I think I know what's going on with the Giants, but you actually know what's going on with the Giants. So tell me what's going on with the Giants.
There's a lot going on with the Giants, starting with high expectations. But I think the biggest question mark, actually there's a couple, but I'll give you the biggest one. Mm-hmm. Will Andrew Thomas, the left tackle, play on Sunday? Now, Andrew Thomas went through the entire summer, or most of the summer, I should say. He was on the PUP list after having a second surgery to his foot. He had the screw that was initially put in his foot removed in April. That kind of set him back a little bit, so he didn't practice in the spring. Was on PUP for most of the summer, didn't partake in any preseason games. So now he's off PUP. He came off PUP, before the 53-man rosters were set, but he's got to get back into football shape. And that is the biggest question mark. Now on Wednesday, he did go out for the padded practice and he did practice on a limited basis, but he's still working into football shape because the big question is any soreness that he feels, is that going to be because of the foot, hence being bad soreness, or is it going to be because of him just getting back into football shape? That's what they have to determine. My gut feeling, he doesn't play this weekend. Now, I have some numbers for you, courtesy of our friends over at Pro Football Focus, with Thomas and without Thomas, just to give you an idea of what the difference is in the two scenarios. So with Andrew Thomas, the Giants last year averaged 105.8 yards on the ground. Without him, 67.5. Big difference, okay? Net yards per play. With Thomas, it was 5.8. Without him, 5.2. And finally, the sack rate, which was a very important thing for the Giants offensive line. The Giants, with Thomas, had a sack rate of just 6.4%. Without him, 9.2%. So he is a key member of that team. It's somebody that you want on the field. And it's especially important because, look, the Giants have a new quarterback. Russell Wilson is going to be the starter. We may or may not see Jackson Dart. I don't think we will this week, but they certainly left the door open for that. But you want to make sure that whoever your quarterback is on the center, that he has a brick wall in front of him so that he can get the ball downfield, so he can get the ball to the receivers in the flats and do all the things that he needs to do.
Yeah, look, I mean, we all know that, it's obviously very important, but, I always go back to Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks. It's really hard to be a good football team if you're bad in the trenches. It's really hard to be a bad football team when you're good in the trenches, right? And when the New York Giants, the trenches is kind of where some of the questions about this team really reside, especially on the offensive side of things. And when you look at the Commanders, divisional teams know each other very, very well, right? But this Washington Commanders defensive front has some new pieces. Dietrich Wise Jr. coming over from the New England Patriots, Javon Kinlaw coming over from the New York Jets via the San Francisco 49ers before that. And both these guys are going to help bring a different dynamic to the Washington Commanders defensive line, meaning that the New York Giants offensive line, you're going to see some things from this unit that you've never seen before. You're going to see some things that you've never seen on tape. Unscouted looks are not uncommon, but of course, week one, you get the most unscouted looks. So you need the best guys on the field possible in order to get that done. So if you don't think Andrew Thomas is playing this weekend, obviously, Patricia, that's a big blow to the Giants offensive line. Who is stepping up in his place, and how much confidence do you have in that individual to be able to hold up at all for what Thomas brings to the group?
Yeah, so the Giants have been playing James Hudson III, who they acquired from Cleveland in free agency at left tackle all spring, all summer. James Hudson III, we'll say he's serviceable. Is he Andrew Thomas? No. Nobody's Andrew Thomas, okay?
Right.
There were some hiccups in this game. I'm talking about Hudson's game in the summer, but head coach Brian Dable has confidence in him. Offensive line coach Carmen Brasillo has been coaching the guy up. And, look, the hope is that if Andrew Thomas cannot go this week, maybe they get him back next week. They'd rather have him healthy for the long haul. They're planning on the long haul with this team. So they have to miss one game, or he has to miss the one game. I don't think they're going to be too broken up about it. If it ends up being 4 games, 5 games, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah, and I think that's important, right? I mean, you gotta keep the big picture in mind. Like every coach and every team will tell you, like, we're worried about this week and this week only, go 1-0 and all these other rah-rah things. But the truth of the matter is you have to kind of keep one eye on the 300-meter target on the entirety of the season, because like you said, you push Andrew Thomas out there too early trying to go 1-0 in week 1. Next thing you know, you might have gone 1-0 in week 1, but now you're 0-4 for the next 4 weeks. Now you're 1-5 because you lost your starting left tackle. So I think that's a great point that you make. Here in the DMV and around the Washington Commanders, the biggest story is not in the trenches, but certainly relates to what the trenches are going to help hopefully facilitate, and that is the run game, right? Brian Robinson Jr., last year's RB1. This year's RB1, honestly, until about 2 weeks left in training camp in the preseason, gets traded to the San Francisco 49ers. So in his place is essentially going to be a rotation of veteran Austin Eckler, another veteran Jeremy McNichols, young third-year running back Chris Rodriguez Jr., and rookie Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who we call Bill around these parts if you haven't heard. And, a lot of the conversation has been who is going to be the true RB1. Is it going to be Chris Rodriguez Jr.? Is it going to be Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt? I mean, a lot of people have kind of forgotten that Austin Eckler is a very respectable running back. Now, Austin is not a bell cow. And in fact, I remember when Austin came to Washington, he actually told us he left Los Angeles because they wanted a dude they could hand the ball off to. He said 300 times. I don't know if that's actually what they wanted, but you get the picture, and he knows he's just not that kind of guy. He needs to be part of a committee effort. So while Austin Eckler is going to be your most consistent carry getter player, whatever you want to call it, rep share guy, these other backs are going to get involved. I think Jeremy McNichols is probably going to get involved more in week 1 than anybody else. But Chris Rodriguez Jr., Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt certainly have their abilities that they're going to bring to the field. Dan Quinn loves their versatility, but also admitted this is going to be more than a 1-week process to figure out who's best where, who's going to get more touches than who, and all this other stuff. So Patricia, coming into this game, again, the Giants know the Commanders, certainly, but this is an element of this team that they don't know, because right now the Commanders honestly don't even know how that's going to shape out.
Yeah, I was talking to Dexter Lawrence today about the Commanders' run game. And I said to him, how is it different now that Brian Robinson isn't there and, Austin Eckler is there? I said, how does this change? He goes, they've got guys that can do multiple things. He says, you never know what you're going to get. And he says, we've got to be on our toes against this Washington run defense. And as you know, David, the Giants' run defense in the past hasn't been very good.
Right.
And I did a show on that, actually. One of the things that I found was that the Giants had been playing, or at least last year, they played Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns with their hand in the dirt a little too much than they probably should have. And just about all the major runs that opponents were able to get came when those guys had their hands down in the dirt. Yep. So this year, the Giants put a big emphasis on adding to the defensive front. They brought in Roy Robertson Harris. They brought in, Darius Alexander in the draft. They've got to stop the run. They've got to do a better job of that. Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator, has no excuse because now he's got the personnel. So he's got no excuse to put another shoddy run defense on that field.
Yep. Look, you got the Dallas Cowboys trading Micah Parsons to get better in run defense. You got Dan Quinn and the Washington Commanders replacing 3/5 of their starting defensive line, 3/4 of the starting defensive line to get better in run defense. You got the New York Giants spending draft capital and doing everything else to go improve run defense. There might be a reason why.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about the Eagles here, though. The big picture storylines are obviously fascinating. They're going to have a big part of who comes out victorious in this game. But there's other battles in the line of scrimmage, in the vicinity of the line of scrimmage that we got to talk about next. Coming up on this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Giants and Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's crossover Thursday episode brought to you in part by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP. Who delivered? Powered by DoorDash. And obviously the season hasn't started yet. So we're looking back at training camp, just like you can win every Saturday or Sunday with DoorDash streaks, saving more time every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered the most. So let's break it down. For the Washington Commanders in training camp and the preseason, rookie right tackle, first round draft pick, Josh Connerly Jr. delivered in a big way. He came into camp as a first round pick. Always have huge expectations, even as a late first-round pick. He was dominant in pass protection drills as training camp and the preseason progressed. He opened up lanes in the running game. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week through camp, this performance was not a fluke. Just like Josh Connerly Jr. delivered for the Commanders, DoorDash delivers for you on the weekends. With DoorDash streaks, you save every Saturday. You order, stack it up all season. You can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Continuing now, today's Locked On Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders, Locked On Giants. And Patricia, we are now going to shift gears a little bit to our key matchups, but we're not going to shift too far away, right? It's like first gear to second gear because we're staying in the trenches. Left tackle Laramie Tunsil, 5-time Pro Bowler, dominant blocker, part of a very bad offensive line in Houston last year, but he was, by all accounts, the best part of a very bad offensive line. Why is he the matchup you're targeting for the New York Giants this weekend?
Well, he's going to see Brian Burns in all likelihood. And Brian Burns last year, no disrespect to Dexter Lawrence or Sexy Dexy, as he likes to be called, but Brian Burns was the Giants' best pass rusher last year. And to give you some numbers real quick, Brian Burns finished with only 8.5 sacks, which was a half sack less than what Dexter Lawrence recorded in, I think, 12 games. But 66 pressures, which led the New York Giants defense. He had a 14.9% win rate, which led the New York Giants. 14.2% pressure rate, which led the New York Giants, okay? Brian Burns is a handful. Now, with this defense that the Giants have assembled, good luck trying to figure out who you're going to double up. You figure you've got Dexter Lawrence, who will probably get a lot of double teams because he's a load to handle and he's a disruptor. That should leave, theoretically, Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau free on the sidelines, on the edges, rather. So unless they're planning to chip Burns a lot, which I could possibly see, but Tunsil versus Burns, to me, that's going to be the matchup that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. How disruptive can Brian Burns be against a very good offensive lineman in Laramie Tunsil?
Yeah, Brian Burns also has some Spider-Man tendencies, right? So I've talked to Laramie Tunsil in the locker room this week, Patricia, and maybe get him like a green mouthpiece or something and just, maybe teach him like that Green Goblin laugh or something. And every time he stonewalls Brian Burns, just try to win the mental side of the game, right? Try to frustrate him a little bit, do all those things. I think you're 100% right. Look, Laramie Tunsil was brought in, 5-time Pro Bowler, right? He was brought in to secure that edge. Brandon Coleman last year, rookie left tackle. Now he's the starting left guard for the Commanders offensive line. Did an admirable job, right? But he was a 3rd-round draft pick for a reason, and that certainly showed. Laramie Tunsil is not a 3rd-round draft pick. Laramie Tunsil is certainly a bigger improvement, and Brandon Coleman is okay with understanding that because he's Laramie Tunsil. The idea is you're not going to have to chip as much because Commanders chip blocked a lot last year. On the left side, on the right side, they did it a lot. And what chip blocking does, everybody understands this, is it prevents your weapons from getting into the field, at least as fast, if not at all sometimes. And so the idea is you don't want to chip block as much. Cliff Kingsbury loves to spread the ball out, wants to use the entirety of the field. Well, if you've got 1 or 2 weapons staying in to help block, you have less weapons to spread the field out, right? So it's a very easy connection to make. This week might be a little bit different, though. Look, I think initially Laramie Tunsil is going to get one-on-one against Brian Burns. Like, they're going to give him the opportunity and they're going to do those things. But listen, if Brian Burns starts creating a little bit of problem for Laramie Tunsil, it's going to be okay. And they're going to chip block for him a little bit, because on the other side of things, the right tackle side, Josh Connolly Jr., I do think there might be a rotation still with Andrew Wiley, the veteran, things like that. But either way, you're probably going to get some more chip blocks over there as they try to handle the pass rush on that side and the edge defenders on that side. So Laramie Tunsil, if he can lock down Brian Burns by himself, no chip blocks necessary, absolutely going to help accelerate what the Washington Commanders are trying to do on offense, which means, like you said, if Brian Burns can wreak havoc, then he's going to prevent the Washington Commanders from taking off on offense here in week 1. Patricia, I'm staying in the trenches as well. Andrew Thomas, best New York Giants offensive lineman. If he's not going to play, that's a huge problem, because you know better than I know that the New York Giants offensive line is a huge question mark for this season. Javon Kinlaw, Dietrich Wise Jr., they were brought in to solidify that run defense, but they're also two guys that have pass rushing ability, and more importantly, the ability to free up guys like Frankie Louvu to wreak havoc in the backfield, go get in Russell Wilson's face, because look, I love Russell Wilson. We know he loves those moonshots, but you know what else he loves? Getting rid of the ball before he gets hit. And unfortunately, that opens up the door for DBs to jump on routes and try to get interceptions off of those passes that are coming out before he gets hit as well. So that's what the Washington Commanders are going to be looking to do, Patricia. Javon Kinlaw, Dietrich Wise Jr., no game film on them other than one preseason game, 2 drives. How much are you concerned about that matchup from the Giants side?
Oh, very concerned. Like I said, there is no Andrew Thomas other than Andrew Thomas. And if he doesn't play this weekend, and right now, even though he was limited in practice on Wednesday, I still have my doubts if he's going to be ready to go on Sunday. That's going to be a significant hole. That's going to be a big challenge for James Hudson III. I think if that ends up being the case, you're going to see a lot of help blocking over there. Maybe a tight end, maybe a running back to chip, some of those guys. I think they're going to have to give help over there, because I think Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle, he should be able to handle whatever comes his way by himself. So I would not be surprised if we see a lot of the tight end over on that left side if Andrew Thomas can't play.
Yep. And I'll tell you what, man, you do that. Look, Javon Kinlaw, don't look at him just a D tackle. He's going to be listed as D tackle. He can play outside. He can play inside. Dietrich Wise Jr. prides himself on being a guy that can line up outside, can also come down inside. He says he can play in the shade. Now, when he told me that, he also laughed and said he's not going to do it very often. But if asked to, he feels like he can hold his own. Von Miller, I'll tell you what, Patricia, if I didn't know how old Von Miller was, I would not think Von Miller was as old as Von Miller is. Frankie Louvu, of course, looking to take a second-team All-Pro berth last year and turn that into a first-team All-Pro berth. And look, the more it goes both ways for all sides of offenses, right? The more they have to chip block, the less they've got weapons in the field. The fewer weapons you have in the field, the more the defense can focus 2 guys or so on Malik Neighbors. Nobody is sneaking Wan'Dale Robinson into this matchup unwillingly. Like, the Commanders are aware of Wan'Dale. They're aware of the other Giants' weapons. But again, it was really weird, Patricia, because when you look at last year, like, the Giants O-line, not great. Giants run defense, not great. But I think you would agree, 2 of their best performances last year came against the Washington Commanders. And so this year, Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, this entire coaching staff, they wanted to make sure that, no, if the Giants O-line is bad, if the Giants run defense is bad, we are going to be a part of that party as well. We're not going to be on the outside looking in. So trenches, important in every single game. But this game, literally, it's all like, don't even watch the ball. Just watch the trenches, and you're going to find out who wins this game. So knowing who wins the individual matchups is one thing. Executing that complete game plan is what's going to take one of these teams to 1-0. Because heaven help us if we go 0-0-1, Patricia. I don't know about you, but I'm probably going to melt down. We're going to talk about what's going to happen here coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Giants, Locked On Commanders, crossover Thursday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Giants and Locked On Commanders brought to you by Mazda. And Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive. That's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every single detail. We saw the same kind of special performance this preseason in the DMV from rookie running back Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Bill, as we affectionately call him, created a ton of hype around himself, came in with a good amount of hype, created even more. His routine play makes things feel special. It's more than just routine. That's the same feeling you get the moment you get behind the wheel of a Mazda. Things are not routine anymore. The smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. And while that hype is exciting, you still need substance to back it up. Mazda offers more than safety. It's won more 2025 IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. It's the small details that make the big plays. And just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. That's Mazda. Move and be moved. This crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Giants is also brought to you in part by FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, if you're a new customer, a new member to FanDuel, you can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. You can bet that $5 on football and use that $300 anywhere on the FanDuel app. I love using FanDuel because you can bet on every matchup that we were just talking about and the entire matchup as a whole. If you think Brian Burns is going to do damage against Laramie Tunsil, you can find that player prop. If you want to build a same game parlay, which I love, Terry McLaurin touchdown, maybe a sack from Javon Kinlaw, you can do that too. You can even do touchdown for Terry McLaurin, sack for Brian Burns. You can play both sides of the coin. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays, your Mondays, your Thursdays, and even sometimes your Saturday. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by going to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. For the Giants to pull off a road upset, it's less about the spectacular plays, although you certainly love to see those if you're on the Giants side, more about avoiding the foolish pre-snap penalties that killed the New York Giants all last year. Patricia, we all know mental mistakes are the worst mistakes. I'm pretty sure Brian Dable agrees with Dan Quinn and every other head coach you and I have probably ever covered. You can deal with the aggressive penalties, the competitive penalties. It's the mental mistakes, the dumb penalties that should not happen that kill everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the Giants, especially in an unfriendly environment, they got to be locked in and focused. All right. Too many pre-snap penalties last year, thwarted drives, and this team is just not good enough just right now to where they can commit a penalty and say, oh, okay, no big deal, we'll bounce back. No. They went backwards far too often. And when you go from second and short, third and short, and now you commit a false start, now you've got second and long, third and long, that changes your entire approach. That gives the advantage to the defensive side of the ball. And you know what? This is a team, and another aspect of this is this Giants team has to start off fast, which means the game's got to be as neat as possible for them. The Giants in the last two regular season openers, they've been outscored 68-6. They've only scored 3 points of those 6 points, 3 points in the first half. So you can't be having mistakes that, abort a drive, a promising looking touchdown drive. And now all of a sudden you've got to settle for a field goal or you come up empty. So very, very important. I know the Giants have been locked in on that. They've been working on that. Matter of fact, over the summer, Brian Dable, if you committed a pre-snap penalty, you were pulled out. So it was like high time you were holding guys accountable for screwing up in that regard.
Yeah, I like that mentality. I like that methodology. Jayden Daniels also kicked a teammate out of the huddle for committing a false start. You love that kind of accountability because that's how important those things are. Patricia, for the Commanders, their keys to victory, establish the run and establish it early, right? Again, everybody wants to know is the New York Giants run defense going to be improved this year over last year? The Washington Commanders need to come out of week one with everybody saying, no, the Giants run defense is just as bad as it was last year. Now, if it gets better after that, so be it. But this week, you need to not be the outlier. You need to repeat the patterns of last year. Don't be the guy left outside of the party. Continue your home dominance. Look, Washington, they need to get their home crowd involved in this game early. We know Giants fans travel. We know there's going to be a good amount of Giants fans in Northwest Stadium on Sunday. One, because the DMV is a transplant area, and two, because they travel well, and it's not that far to travel, to be quite honest with you. But last year, the Commanders had 7 home wins in that season, or 7 or more home wins, for the first time since 1991. Last year, there was a lot of 1991 references and comparisons because that's how long it's been since we saw the Commanders play football to the same quality as they did back in 1991 when Washington was doing much better things. So continue that, but get the home crowd involved early to create problems for the Giants. And then Jayden Daniels needs to be Jayden Daniels. I'm not going to say that I'm really concerned about this, to be quite honest with you, but new addition to Laramie Tunsil, better pass blocking is expected. Deebo Samuel on the roster, better weapon, a little bit more versatility in the offense is expected. Those things can ideally, potentially lead you to a Jayden Daniels quarterback who says, you know what, I don't need to be as athletic. I don't need to run as much as I did last year. I don't need to challenge my 891 rookie record for quarterback rushing. I can just stay in the pocket longer. I don't think Jayden Daniels is going to be that anyway. I'm pretty sure Jayden is a Tiger that's very, very comfortable with his stripes. And I don't say that because he played at LSU, but it's a good analogy. So I'm not actually concerned about it, but the potential is certainly there. So I think a key there is going to be Jayden being Jayden and making Malik Neighbors, his buddy on the sideline, watch in amazement and pain as he does not get his revenge against his best friend.
Yeah, I mean, the Giants, I went around the locker room today asking them, I said, how is Jayden Daniels' game matured from his first game last year to, the NFC championship game? Smarter, quicker decisions, more decisive. You can see the leadership oozing out of his pores. Just a lot of, respect from the locker room. And Jayden Daniels is a guy who can hurt a team with his legs, with his arms. There's just so many things that he can do and do at a high enough level. And the Giants, they know that that's, something they got to keep an eye on. That's something that they can't let ruin their game. And, oh, by the way, the Giants should have a healthy kicker this year. I know in the first game last year they didn't. But Graham Gano, for those wondering, he is healthy and ready to go.
That's good. I don't know Graham personally, but I know some people here who know Graham personally. And from all accounts, he's a really good dude. So happy to hear that he is in good health. One of these teams is going to be 1-0. One of these teams is going to be 0-1. Neither of these teams better be 0-1. I'm going to punch myself if that happens for even speaking it as a possibility. We both covered a Giants Commanders tie. We don't need to do it anytime ever again. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Locked On Commanders, Locked On Giants. Next time, we're going to wrap up our thoughts ahead of this Week 1 NFC East divisional matchup. Dan Quinn said on Wednesday that it just makes things just a little bit more magical when you open the season against a division rival, and I could not agree with him more. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL season previews on the Locked On NFL channel. 8 episodes get you ready for everything going on around the NFL divisions. Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. To the everydayers, we see you every day. We appreciate you every day, and we thank you especially today. Until next time, everybody out there, be safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again real soon on Locked On Commanders, Locked On Giants, both parts of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.